asked you, the class, for questions, and many of you sent them in. Janice L. from Amarillo, who is a faithful follower of this ministry and these lessons, and is basically a part of our class also. She said, I would love an answer to how old the earth is. I believe God created everything just as the Bible says, but when? Scientists estimate the earth to be about 4.54 billion years old, but young earth creationists think it is 6,000 to 10,000 years old. Well, to answer this question, we're going to answer it from the point of, what does the Bible say? What are the words in the Bible that tell us how old this world is today? We're not going to go look at carbon-14 dating or anything like that. Now, we've already actually answered this question before in volume number 1 of this series. But we went into all the details of how everything is done and where everybody gets everything. But now we're just going to focus on the fact of, what does the Bible say? And so to answer this question, we will look at the world's age based on the biblical record, number 1. Then we're going to have to go and we're going to have to include the Persian history record of their kings. And then we're going to look at the introduction of Julius Caesar's calendar that basically we're on now, that was introduced in 45 BC. Every writing out there always includes time markers, and so does the Bible. The Bible includes time markers that show when events happened in history of the Bible. Now, fortunately, the Lord provides a summary of the key time markers related to the age of the world. And therefore, we only need to look at a few passages to find out the age of the world. I think you'll be quite shocked at how few passages we have to look at. So we will begin with Adam's creation. Now, in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, the Lord instructed Moses to begin the book of Genesis and write it. And of course, it happened up on Mount Sinai. And this happened during his first 40-day visit to Mount Sinai after he arrived with the nation of Israel from Egypt. And in these chapters in the book of Genesis, we learn that the Lord created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th day. Now, we're not going to deal with what a day is and all that type of stuff. So we also learn that Adam was created on that 6th day of the first week as a fully grown man. He did not experience being born as a child or growing into a man. And he was a man from the very first day of his life. And this also marked the start of the first year of the world. So now we're going to examine the record by the Lord to Moses, outlining all the descendants of Adam down to the birth of Jacob. Now that's what we're going to find out first. So we're going to go from Adam to Jacob, the father of the nation of Israel. Now, the descendants of Adam are called in the scriptures the sons of God. And we get to that as we're headed through from Genesis chapter 5 from 11. So let's look at Genesis chapter 5 first. I want you to notice in Genesis chapter 5, I have taken the information. Now there it says Adam was 130 years old when he gave birth to Seth. Okay, so look at our chart here. Adam was created in year 1. Seth was born in year 130. Seth had a child named Enosh in year 234. Enosh had a son, Kenan, in year 323. And we can go all the way down until, on this particular slide, in the year 1552 years after the creation of Adam, Shem was born to Noah. Now, I want you to look at something here. Now, all of these in this list are the sons of God. Now, I have highlighted in red the line where Enosh is born, Adam's grandson. Now, the sons of God in Genesis represents the descendants of Adam, who called upon the name of the Lord for their salvation. Calling upon the name of the Lord for salvation begins in the year of Adam's grandson's birth, Enosh. Not all the descendants of Adam's line are included in Jacob's ancestry, of which this is going to head us to. But we are fortunate that the Lord provides Moses with the ages of Jacob's ancestors that are in the line of the sons of God. And he not only gives the age that the age and how long that the father lived, but he also tells us the specific age of when that son was born. So in Genesis chapter 5 and 11, we can trace the years from Adam's creation until Jacob was born. You will notice in the table that for each birth of a son, I included the father's name and all previous fathers who were still alive. So you see all these names. Okay, so Adam's created, and then Seth is born. Adam and Seth are still alive when Enosh is born. Adam, Seth, and Enosh are still alive when Kenan is born to Enosh. And we go all the way down the list, all the way down the list. Now I want you to look down here. You see 1,139 years after the creation of Adam. You'll notice that Adam, Seth, and Enosh and Enoch are no longer on that line. The reason for that is because they have died, or as Enoch has walked with God. And so I have dropped the names off. So this is a list of who's alive when someone is born. Now looky here. You'll also see this. You'll see 1,552 years after the creation of Adam, Shem is born. Shem is going to ride on the ark with his father Noah. You'll notice that Kenan, Mahalath, and Jared have dropped off because they have died. At the time that Shem is born, only Methuselah, Lamech, Noah are alive when Shem is born. Now, we go on down to chapter 11 and the whole list continues. From Shem has his son. You go on down, his son has Shelah. I go on down, it's Eber. We go all the way down, and I've highlighted in red 1,993 years after the creation of Adam, Abraham was born. Now I want you to look at this. This is important. When Abraham is born, Noah, Shem, Apakshad, Shelah, Eber, Ru, Serug, and Terah are all still alive. When Abraham is born in the same area where Noah, Shem, and all these people lived, Noah would have grown up knowing some of these guys. Knowing. Now, Noah actually dies 8 years after Abraham is born. 8 years old is good enough to know he knew Noah. Now looking down at the next list. In 2092 years after the creation of Adam, Isaac is born. Look who's still alive. Shem, Shelah, Eber, Abraham, Isaac. They're all alive. Those are alive, guys are alive when Isaac is born. And then, of course, we come on down to, looky here, 2152. Jacob is born to Isaac. Jacob will know Eber, Abraham, and Isaac. All right, good. So what does this tell us? This list, this Genesis chapter 5 and chapter 11, tells us that 2,152 years have passed since the creation of Adam. Now we need to determine something about Jacob and his family, who make up the nation of Israel. So when Jacob enters into Egypt, okay, and takes his family, and there they become the nation of Israel. Now this is very important, and the reason why is we're jumping from the birth of a son and son of son to the age of Jacob when he moved, because we've got another time marker that refers back to when Jacob moved his family into Egypt. And so we have the birth of Jacob on the list that moves to the top, and we're going to Genesis chapter 47:28. We hear these words. Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. Okay, so now we know how old he was when he died, and we know how long he has been in Egypt. Now we got to figure this out, and here's where we figured it out. 147 years minus 17 means that Jacob was 130 years old when he moved into Egypt. So now we know that Jacob moved into Egypt 2,282 years after the creation of Adam. In Exodus chapter 12, verse 41, we hear these words. And at the end of 430 years, special words here, to the very day. So 430 years to the very day they moved in, all the host of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. Now we know that the nation of Israel was in Egypt for exactly 430 years to the very day. Exodus 12 is going to tell us that that nation left Egypt at the end of the day after the Passover had occurred at midnight. That day is known as Nisan the 15th. That means that Jacob and his family moved into Egypt on Nisan the 15th. So doing the math, we find in Exodus 12:41 that Moses led Israel out of Egypt on Nisan the 15th, 2,711 years after the creation of Adam. If you do the math, 2282 plus 430 is actually 2712. However, Israel departed in the 430th year, not after the 430th year, so we have to subtract 1 year from that year to get the timing right. So our next marker that we're going to look at is we've got them out of Egypt, and the next marker is we are told by the Lord that Solomon laid a cornerstone for the new temple in Jerusalem. We pick that up in 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1. Look what it says. Now it came about in the 480th year after the sons of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, how important that is, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. So the nation of Israel left Egypt 2,711 years after the creation of Adam. And now we learn that Solomon laid the cornerstone for the temple 480 years after Israel came out of Egypt. So let's do the math. 2,711 plus 480. You got it. Here we are. Here's the answer. Solomon set the cornerstone 3,191 years after the creation of Adam. Oh, but we're not through yet. You would think that we would be through. We've got 3,191 years out of the way. Let's look on to this. Pull that topic to the top, and let's go to 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 42. We need to find out how long did Solomon reign. He laid the cornerstone on the 4th year, but how long did he reign? Well, here we find this. Thus the time that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years. Okay, well, we've already spent 4 years in the last time marker, so now we've just got to get the rest. 40 years minus 4 years after starting the temple means that Solomon reigned 36 more years as king. And so now we have 36 years. That means Solomon died 3,227 years after the creation of Adam, and Rehoboam, his son, becomes the king. From the remaining parts of 1 Kings and 2 Kings, we can trace the kings of the southern kingdom to determine the year since Adam's creation. Now, we do not need to trace the northern kingdom because it's going to fall to Assyria 116 years before Nebuchadnezzar takes control of the southern kingdom. So we do 1 Kings chapter 12 all the way through 2 Kings, and here's what we find. After Solomon's death, going to the record of the kings and how often they ruled and how long they ruled and all of that, and I've got them listed here, we find that the southern kingdom will last from the 3,227th year after the creation of Adam, the death of Solomon, until 3,600 years when the temple is going to be destroyed. And it is destroyed in the year that Zedekiah is the king and Nebuchadnezzar brings an end to the kings of the southern kingdom. So now we have 3,600 years since the creation of Adam. Well, after the temple was destroyed in Jerusalem, here's just a fact. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon Empire will last 50 years. Cyrus the Great conquers the Babylonian Empire. Cyrus issues a decree that is going to allow all the Israelites to return to Judea if they want to go back. Most of them do not return. Most of them don't. Most of them stay over in the Iran area. Now, Daniel is going to give us a prophecy, and it's a very important prophecy. Daniel 9:25, he says, "So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks." 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So our question comes in, where in the world is there a decree to go and restore and rebuild Jerusalem? And for this, we need to go to the Persian records of the royal line of Cyrus the Great. And we're going to trace it down to Artaxerxes the First. And so here are the years. Now, these are lunar years. These are not solar years. We're not on a solar calendar yet. We're still on a 354-day a year lunar calendar. Cyrus the Great becomes the king there in 3651. We run on down, and here what I've done on this list, which is the same list you have in your notes. You'll notice that, for instance, in 3653, Cyrus dies. He's followed by Shambius in that same year. And in 3659, Shambius is followed by Smyrnus, followed by Darius I in the same year. In other words, Shambius dies, Smyrnus comes on, Smyrnus goes away, Darius I in that same year. Then we have Darius I and all the way down. By the way, Daniel is still prophesying all the way through Darius I. And then we come to Xerxes, and then, of course, his son takes over after him. And we know that he takes over in the 3712th year since the creation of Adam. And then, according to these Persian records, Artaxerxes is in his 7th year as the king in 3718. So in 3718 years after the creation of Adam, Artaxerxes is going to make a decree. So when did Artaxerxes make the decree to rebuild Jerusalem? It's in Ezra chapter 7. And during the 7th year of the reign of Artaxerxes I, the king issued a decree for Ezra to return with some people traveling with him to use the Persian treasury to rebuild Jerusalem. And this is in Ezra chapter 7. We find this decree. Now I'm going to take it real slow. I'm not going to read all of chapter 7. But in chapter 7, verse 1, it says, "Now after these things, in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, there went up Ezra." And you keep reading, Ezra's going to Jerusalem. In Ezra chapter 7, 8, it says, "And he came," this is Ezra, "came to Jerusalem in the 5th month, which was the 7th year of the king." So that's where we've got the 7th year of the king. He's got orders to go rebuild. And of course, then we come up and in Ezra chapter 7, verse 23, the king has issued in the decree, "Whatever is commanded by the God of heaven, let it be done with zeal for the house of the God of heaven, so that there will not be wrath against the kingdom of the king and his son." In other words, Artaxerxes is saying, go rebuild Jerusalem, use the Persian government, government's treasury, whatever you need, build it, so that your God will not be angry with me and all of my kingdom and all of my sons. Now, as listed among the Persian monarchs, okay, this 7th year of King Artaxerxes is 3,718 years after the creation of Adam. Okay, now we've already read the prophecy about Daniel, but here's the interesting thing. Let's go back to it. If you remember, it says that from the issuing of the decree, which is going to happen in 3718, that's the reason why I have it on the top of the screen, and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now, in the Hebrew, it actually is like this, or in the Aramaic, it's 7 weeks of years. So 7 weeks that Daniel's talking about is actually 49 years. And then the 62 weeks that he's talking about here in this passage is actually 434 years. We pull those two together and we find out it's 483 years until the Messiah will come as the Prince. Okay, now I'll actually tell you something true. The reason why there's a break between the 7 and the 62, or the 49 years and the 434 years, is because of this. At this point in time, whenever Daniel gives this decree, or gives this prophecy, that when the decree is given, there'll be 49 years, and then the 434 years is because when Artaxerxes gives the decree to rebuild the Jerusalem, 49 years later, the book of Malachi will be written and the total Old Testament will be complete. It's actually here a prophecy for the completion of the Old Testament. All the story of the Old Testament is completed with the book of Malachi and then the 62 weeks. What happens at the end of the 62 weeks? Well, here's what happens at the end of the 62 weeks. Until Messiah the Prince. That means that Jesus is going to be born 483 lunar years after the decree to go to Ezra to go back and rebuild Jerusalem. Jesus is born in Bethlehem. Now, the Persian Empire, which will later become known as Iran, was founded by Cyrus the Great and is considered in our history, and it is the longest lasting monarchy in the world. It began with Cyrus and it lasted until 1979. When the Shah of Iran was overthrown during the Jimmy Carter presidency years in the United States. And of course, all that time, it is a friend of America while America is part of, was after America was born. And because of the continuous line of Persian monarchs, its history is well preserved. And so here are the years of the Persian rulers from Cyrus to Artaxerxes that we have spoken about, so we know exactly when Artaxerxes reigned, because the Persian government lasted until 1979. And there you see Shah Riza, who was exiled. He was sick. He came to America. Those of us who are alive in those days, we know this. That was the monarchy. Now, by the way, I want to add one extra thing. Of course, his family had to leave also. And here is the Shah of Iran, who the monarchy ended with him. Here is his son. He is exiled. He is alive today. He is ready to return as the new Shah of Iran if the regime in Iran today is overthrown. He is considered the crown prince in waiting to go back to Iran to continue Cyrus the Great's reign of monarchies that have ruled Iran. What a wonderful thing. Okay, so far now, we've gotten to Jesus' birth. 4,200 lunar years since the creation of Adam, and they're made up of 354 days per year. All the Old Testament years are lunar years. But 41 years before Jesus was born, Julius Caesar established the Julian calendar for the Roman Empire. We still use the Julian calendar, except for we're 10 days different than it, because Pope Gregory in 1582 had to take out 10 days to get the spring equinox in the right place, and they had to make some math changes, and now we call it the Gregorian calendar, but it's basically the Julian calendar. So at the time of the writing of this lesson, which is where we are right now, it is the year 2025 on the Julian calendar. Okay, so now let's transfer here, and you'll see here that on our list, I have Jesus is born 4,200 to 4,100 years in that year, that 1 year time, in Bethlehem after the creation of Adam. On the Julian calendar, it becomes 4 BC. Okay, So now we need to do a little math. We've got to switch from the lunar calendar to the solar calendar of Julius Caesar. And so to do that, 4,200 years on the lunar calendar is how many years on the solar calendar? The 4,200 years and multiply it times the days per year, 354. And that equals 1,486,800 days. Now we divide that by our solar calendar years, 365.25, and that comes out at 4,070 years. So on our calendar, Adam was created 4,070 years before the birth of Jesus. Now that's the solar calendar, but in the Bible calendar, it's 4,200 years. 4,070 years on our solar calendar, plus we've got 2029, because remember, Jesus is born 4 BC. We are in the year 2025. We have to add the 4 years of Jesus' birth. That takes us to, we have had 2,029 years since the birth of Jesus. And we add that to the 4,070, which tells us that we are 6,098 solar years since the creation of Adam in the year 2025. Okay, however, how many years are we in the lunar biblical years that the world is since the creation of Adam? All the Bible is going to be dealt with, and all of eternity is dealt with the lunar years that the Lord put in place for the timing that happened all the way through all the Old Testament. You have to realize, more Old Testament time passed before the Julian calendar was even put in place. In lunar biblical years, which is going to make some of you happy because we're closer to the second coming than we are if we take Julius Caesar and Gregory's years. Now, in Gregory's years, if you remember, in Gregory's years, we are 6,098 years. That means if you say, hey, I want to get to 7,000 years, mercy, we've got a lot of years, over 900 years left. But that's not the way it is in the lunar years, which is the way it is in the Bible. In lunar biblical years, when we do our math and change everything back to lunar years, the world is 6,291 years old as of 2025. That's the biblical record. And I'm telling you, we are eagerly anticipating the 7,000th lunar year and the second coming of our Lord to reign as King of Kings. Now, before I finish up, I want to tell you this. In Matthew chapter 24, it's also in Mark, it's also in Luke, we are told that no one knows the hour of the days. And you're out there going, oh, Jim, you're setting a date. I am setting a date for the return of the Lord 7,000 years to the year after the creation of Adam. I am not setting a date for the return of the Lord to snatch away the church from the earth. That is the context of Matthew 24 and the Mark passage and Luke passage, where Jesus says, no one knows the hour or the day except for God the Father. This is important because we do not know when it is going to happen. Now, actually, we do have a clue because Jesus is also telling us that those who read the signs will know the times. What's the sign? In Revelation, seal 6, we see that after the 144,000 Jews are sealed by the Lord here on earth, which is still in the future, the next thing that happens is on the church calendar, and John is going to see the church, the multitude, with banners and palm branches, move from here on earth to heaven when he turns around and looks at heaven. That is the snatching away of the church. Do we have a date for that? No. Do we know the day is what the Lord said, or the hour? No, we do not. No one knows that except for the Father. So Janice and Amarillo, if you want to know how old the world is today in lunar years, which is the Bible years, it's 6,291 years old. here in 2025. If you want to know in Julius Caesar's and Pope Gregory's calendar, the one we live on today, it is 6,098 years old. Well, that's how old the world is. No matter what anybody else says, that is the biblical record.